Okay, so this video is about control structures and how a slavery system works in relation to having absolute power over its victims without the victims realizing that they've been controlled. And so they willingly go along with it. So here we go, as you can see here, it says police reveal new riot gear 2 years before lockdown. So this image came out in The Age in 2018. So, obviously what happened in 2020. So it goes to show you that a criminal structure always thinks well ahead, right? Like we're talking decades ahead. And so now we're going to move to what a lie is, and then we're going to show you how it was pre-planned years and years ago that the state was going to have absolute control through the use and control of the police, which they actually don't have the power to do if the people understand the true, correct setup. And that's what's missing here. And it's whether the people are willing to liberate themselves from the lies that they've swallowed. So let's look at a definition of what the lie is. A lie is any deviation away from the constant line of truth. So anything that's even a slightly, movement off to left or right or whatever side you want to say, that's no longer the truth. It's immediately a distortion, and it requires truth to create a lie. You can't create a lie out of thin air. You need to start with the truth, and then you start bending it and distorting it, and that's when it becomes the lie. Right? So just as long as you understand that concept, then you're going to understand how all this comes together. So here we go. Okay, so this has come from the LexisNexis dictionary, I'm pretty sure, and it's come from an individual who's really big on the police right now. That's all I'm going to say on that. Yet they're really missing the point of how the deception's done. So they end up playing in the hands of that criminal structure without realizing that there's no remedy there. And they keep supporting it. So they're sort of working against themselves, sadly. So what they've done is they've only highlighted the parts that they want to care about and left out the rest, right? So we're going to read the whole thing and show you how this is a distortion and how it gives absolute power, even though they're giving you something that you can attach to, that you can resonate with. Then you stop understanding what the rest of it means below. So here it goes. So this is the definition of a constable, an independent office dating back to at least the time of Henry I in England. So that's really important, guys. We're going to get back to that a bit later. So just remember that there's a connection to the whole English system of running a system of service, because that's all government is supposed to be. It's just a system of service. And a constable is one part of that service, and that's to do with the people having their rights protected. A constable has independent authority to exercise his or her office. A constable cannot be directed by government or senior police as to who he or she should prosecute. A constable's duty to enforce the law is a personal responsibility, and the constable is answerable only to the law, not to his or her senior officers for the performance of that duty, right? So that's the only part they've highlighted, but what they've missed out is you have a look later, right? It starts getting into all these things. Now they've got 1968, yada, yada, ERs, all this stuff. It's like to do with acts and statutes. So look, Police Regulation Act, straight away, Victoria, 1958. So it's already saying that now it's giving power to Parliament, because read this: members of the Australian Federal Police may perform any duties, exercise any powers that are conferred or imposed on a constable by a law of the Commonwealth or a territory. Now, what does this actually mean, law of the Commonwealth, right? They're not talking about English common law. They're talking about something else, right? And who passes these so-called laws? It's Parliament, right? So here it is. It's telling you right here, Australian Federal Police Act. That's an act of Parliament. That's got nothing to do with what a constable is. Constable cannot be directed by another branch of public servants, because that's all Parliament is. They are just the legislative branch of public servants. And the constables are what? The law enforcement arm of public servants. So you can't have people who are equals telling the others what to do. It doesn't work like that. So this is the mind trick that very few people understand how it's been done, right? So it's now elevated the legislative branch to be the masters of those who have what? The power to use force, the ones that we grant and give consent to use force. As soon as you do that, you are running a state-controlled criminal structure that forcibly dominates and controls the people. So this was done years and years ago, right? Well ahead of before any of us knew what was coming down the pike. So the lowest rank in the police force, Police Administration Act, there you go again, Northern Territory, New South Wales, right? So Queensland, South Australia, right? All these different acts, Tasmania, so they've all done it, right? So he shows you how they've used a little bit of truth, but then they've distorted by saying they have the power to confer and impose. Right? That's very important to understand. Now we're just going to go to the next slide. And you can see how it's done in the Victoria Police one. Just here I'm going to go to an officer in Victoria in any capacity in which I may be appointed, promoted, or reduced to. Right? So that's what they inserted, right? This is where who gets to decide that? Is it the people? No. It's the legislative branch. Now, what needs to be understood here is that a constable is no different to, say, anywhere else that you go to get service. So I want you to think of it like going to a cafe and walking in there, and you're requiring a service, and instead of providing that service, they start dictating to you what you are allowed and are not allowed to say, and how you are to say it if you want to have any service. Are you going to stick around, or are you going to leave? Right now, I want you to imagine that you've gone, stuff this. I'm not going to put up with this, and you leave, and then like half a day later, you get a knock on your door by staff members of that cafe who are now showing up with paperwork saying that you need to come into their own private corporate offices and stand trial for not doing as you were told when you were in that cafe. How many people, right, would say, yeah, that's fair, I'll go do that? Well, that's exactly what happens when the police show up and they show up with these fake court papers. It's no different. If you understand that, then you can finally start liberating your mind. And now I'm going to show you evidence of what happens when you actually do understand that and you use that knowledge. All right, so here we go.
Identify yourself.
Police station.
So that's
exactly right. What's your name, sir?
What's your name?
And you're a sovereign citizen, sir, are you?
So you're making accusations, are you?
No, I'm not making accusations. I'm here to serve some court documents.
So let's just see if you're standing under your oath of office of constable today.
Pardon me?
Are you standing under your oath of office of constable?
Which is what?
You don't know what that is? Are you a public servant?
Of course I'm a public servant.
Okay, so a public servant needs to stand under the oath of office of constable. Is that you?
If
Are you standing under your oath of office of constable?
I am, yes.
You are? Perfect. Let's see. We're about to find out. Here we go. Here we go. Where are you going? Stay here.
I'm not here to answer any of your questions.
No, you're not going to answer it. You're actually going to be on camera. Walking away, proving you're not a holder of constable, that you're actually a private corporate policy enforcement agent.
We'll get these served by the courts.
I must caution you where I stand under Article 60. Where are you going?
So that last bit got cut off, but it's meant to be Article 61, and that's critical because I'm going to show you that in a second, what all that's about. But what I really want to talk about is now, if you really want to understand that, you think about it from a position. I should just move to the Aleister Crowley quote, and I'll get into this in a second, just so you're not looking at a black screen. So if you really think about it, now imagine an employee from the cafe, right, is trying to impose something, and you go, well, where's your authority come from to actually have anything to do with me? Well, that's what that was, right? Because you're a private employee of a private corporation. Where's your authority to come tell me what I have to accept? If you can understand that, and everyone starts speaking to these people like that, but using the true correct system, because the oath of office, if you really understand it, is all about them being in a privileged position, not in a position of authority. That's the big mind trick. They do not have authority. They have the privilege of offering you a service, no different to a cafe. If you can truly understand that, then you can start actually getting your power back and stop being afraid of these criminals. Because you wouldn't accept that from a cafe employee. That's no different, right? So that's how you need to start seeing it. This is about liberating your mind and freeing it from the mental chains that are being placed around it. Because when you see that costume, you start believing that they actually have some authority. No, they are meant to be servants. Now, a servant is someone who is like in service. That means it's a privilege to serve. You would have heard that term before. It's a privilege to serve you. Well, that's exactly what role they're supposed to be doing. And they cannot impose their will over you. That's no longer service. That's really critical to understand. So I'm hoping when you look at that video now, you understand why they left, right? Because if that wasn't true, they never would have left. They would have been imposing their will on you. Because if you don't understand the truth behind the correct system, you're going to keep getting sucked in and you're going to give them power. So now we're going to look at this statement, right? It's a really big one. People who don't know who Aleister Crowley is one of the sort of dark occultists. that was very influential in the whole satanic movement, etc. And this is the way they do it. They do it very subtly, but it's very clear if you can see it, right? This is a statement, a collectivist statement right here. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law, according to who, right? And what does thou wilt mean? The absolute rule of the state. So this is how it's done, right? And I just showed you how they use the police to do that absolute rule, because you can't rule without force. It's not possible. No one would accept you dictating to them unless there was some force involved. Shall be a function of the absolute liberty of each individual will. Now, if your mind is imprisoned, right, and you don't understand the true nature of freedom, then your will is going to be very limited. And if you believe that, you know, there's certain things that are correct, like that Nexus Lexus dictionary meaning that the Parliament has, which is just the legislative branch of public servants, that they have the power to control the police, well, then your will is going to be very limited. That's what it's telling you, right? Love is the law. Love under will. Under whose will, right? Those who are very good at mind trapping the masses who don't understand how they've been trapped. So that's a really important thing to understand here. Okay, so now I'm going to start showing you things that are connected to Article 61 and why that's important. All right, so this is from a guy called Ken O'Dowdney. I've shown you in previous videos. If you look at democracydefined.org, you'll find stuff about this. Now, remember what it said about the constable goes back to Henry I? Now, this is really critical to understand this, right? This has come, somebody's done a lot of understanding about the true nature of the whole English common law system and the reason why there's oaths, etc. Right? It is an irrevocable principle of secular moral justice and the traditional pan-European Irish, German, French, Spanish, Italian, British, Australian, New Zealand, Canadian, and American people's common law governing jurisprudence, and of Magna Carta. Now, that's really important why they're putting Magna Carta 1215 here, because that's the agreement that they had in place. So any form of service to the people is allowed to exist, where the people are in control of it, right? They are in authority over their own system of service because they created it, right? And Magna Carta is that agreement that allows that to happen. Now, that's still binding to today because all those oaths date back to that particular understanding of service. It doesn't matter which Commonwealth country you're in. Article 24 of John's Great Charter and 17 of Henry's and trial shall be by jury, and that at trial by jury, no judge or other officer appointed by government shall preside in criminal cases or lawsuits in which the government is also an interested party, called pleas of the Crown. Now, to me, that needs to read in any cases, regardless of criminal or not. I guess that's what it means by lawsuits. I just don't think that's clear enough. Now, it's got it in Latin here. So I'm going to move on. In such cases, without the observance of this prohibition, there can be neither trial by jury nor legal trial of any type. This is what you really need to understand, how we've been controlled. We don't understand this. Right, now we're going to go into more. Beware of this treasonous fabrication. So this is another part where the truth was subverted with a lie, right, with a distortion. In the official booklet and online British Library translation of Magna Carta 1215, right? So Magna Carta was written in Latin, but the criminals, they went translated and added bits to make it seem like government has power over the people, right? Because it's easy to do if you don't know how to read Latin. It inverts this following phrase at odds, and adds it on to Article 24. That should be held by royal justices. That's what they've added, right? The perjury gives, so this is perjury, right? And it gives the opposite impression that judges appointed by the king, which now you can translate by government, are to hold trials, whereas the following is the actual wording of Magna Carta seen on the original sealed Latin document. So I'm not going to read that because that's not something I'm going to be able to do with any sort of grace. So I'm going to bypass the Latin. But so it directly translates to no sheriff, constable, coroner, or other of our bailiffs. Our means anyone who's running the system of service who administers it. That's from the king down to all the appointed public servants. Shall hold pleas of the crown. And that also says it in the fraudulent version that happened a year after, which is Henry's Great Charter. So the same thing, it wasn't distorted then. So that's really critical to understand. What they did is they added that bit here that says that should be held by the royal justices. See, it's truth, then you add the lie, it distorts it, now it changes the whole meaning, right? And so why don't they want you to know about this? This is really critical here. The emphasis is added to our, right? Because as distinguished from any officials appointed to their positions by government or monarch, at common law, only locally chosen, i.e. elected conveners, usually local bailiffs, stewards, aldermen, sheriffs, and others, can convene trials by jury. That's the correct system that was agreed to. At common law, the conveners, who are now duplicitously referred to as judges, so that's what they did, they inverted it, right? They took something that was existing that had merit and then they change it, right? Have no judicial function whatsoever and are or should be elected regularly by the people, never appointed by government. So this is from the book Blackstone's Analysis of Laws of England. Now, the legal system grabs bits from there, but they won't tell you this part, right? They will never, ever reveal this. And also Sir Geoffrey Gilbert's History of the Common Pleas, right? So it's showing you where it's come from. The reasons for this are simple and pure regarding convening officers, so-called judges, at trials. Impartiality and integrity cannot be obtained nor realistically even expected, right? So remember what it says about malice or ill will about the police, right? That means they're being impartial. Well, it can't be done unless it's done like this. From people who enforce the laws, who are selected by those who also maintain the laws, make and maintain the laws. So what they mean by laws here is legislation, right? So you cannot have the people who are selected by the very people who make the legislation. It's not going to work out for the people. So that's the deception, right? That's how the state has absolute power. At the common law of land, whether in civil or criminal cases, all officers who convene trials are chosen, elected by the people. That's the true way it's supposed to run. And the reason why you don't know about it is because then there'd be none of these monoliths at all, right? We'd be running the show. And the criminals can't have that. According to common law, all conveners, justices, judges are themselves subject to common law. Article 61. Now, hopefully this is starting to make sense to you guys, right? Why this is critical knowledge. And are answerable to the common law and trials of the people, i.e. the trial by jury, and are categorically not protected by elite privilege nor impeachable by government and legislature. So you cannot have public servants impeaching each other. That's, that whole impeachment thing that they do in the US, it's one massive scam. You can't have that because that's like criminals like looking after each other. That's what the whole, what do they keep calling for here? Royal commissions. That's exactly the same scam, right? And so there is no way you are allowed to have public servants protect each other, right? That's not a thing. That's just a criminal act, right? That's like a mafia family running their own trials. It's no different. Government appointed judges may not judge in their own, the government's cause, right? So that's on anything, right? And so therefore you cannot have someone paid by government in a correct court. You just can't, because that is dictatorship. And that's why all the stuff about Magna Carta has been concealed, because the criminals don't want you understanding the true nature of how you are free to decide for yourself by being in charge of the legislation, by you as a jury member actually sitting in judgment of legislation to decide whether it's fair, right? And if we don't have that power, we're always going to be enslaved. That's really critical. And so this is the thing that's why I keep going on about this. And anyone who says, that it's a relic, well, you need to decide whether your freedom's a relic, right? Because there has to be a structure by how you can actually remain free. It's not just an idea in the mind. You need to physically manifest it and make it come to reality. And if you don't know and you can't unimprison your mind and unchain it, then you're not going to be able to make it happen in reality. And all this requires is more and more people to understand the true nature of that system we're supposed to be living under. There's no such thing as a Commonwealth of Australia. That is part of the lie, right? That is the distortion. It does not exist, and you need to know why. And this is why they conceal the Magna Carta for a reason. They'll tell you little bits about it, but they won't tell you the full truth, right? So that's how they get away with it. They have to tell you little bits about it. Now I'm just going to come back and show you where you can find this information. So I'll be right back. But here it is. It's the Magna Carta site. It's Magna Carta Australia, as you can see, magnacarta1215.com. So we're just going to go to Learn, drop down to Reading, and then we've got all the reading material. And then we're going to go to, where is it? Constitution Treatise by Ken O'Dowd, right? This is where you're going to learn a lot of critical stuff, and it's all referenced, guys, right? You'll see some very well-known names that they reference in here. This is about an 8-page document. It's not a heavy read. It's really easy. But if you're very serious of starting to learn how you've been lied to and the true nature of justice and how it was supposed to work this whole time, and none of these things would have ever happened to us. We wouldn't be getting all this money ripped off us. None of this CDC, CBDC, none of this would be coming down the pike, right? We'd be all in charge of our own lives, right? So if that matters to you, right, I highly recommend you start reading this stuff. So now I'm going to go back and finish off. Here it is. This one's a really good one. I love this one. The best way to keep a prisoner from escaping is to make sure he never knows he's in a prison. And it's all about the mental prison, guys. Right? You don't see the walls of your mental prison, but their job is to keep that prison in place. Criminals are experts at it, right? Because they just take truths, they seduce you with the parts you can recognize, and then they distort the rest, right? And then you just take the whole thing as the truth, right? Where it's not. It's only one element. And so I really love this one. And remember, they need to tell you what they're doing, right? By means of ever more effective methods of mind manipulation, the democracies will change their nature. The quaint and old forms, elections, parliaments, Supreme Courts, and all the rest will remain. So they'll leave all the pillars there that makes you believe that this is legitimate, but that's only a facade. The underlying substance will be a new kind of totalitarianism. All the traditional names, all the hallowed slogans will remain, so they still give you, the whole oath and all that kind of stuff. Exactly what they were in the good old days. It's right there in front of you guys. They've shown you what they've done. Democracy and freedom will be the theme of every broadcast and editorial. So they're going to make it appear, right? Always coaching your mind, right? Meanwhile, the ruling oligarchy and its highly trained elite of soldiers, policemen, thought manufacturers, and mind manipulators, will quietly run the show as they see fit. And that's exactly what's been happening this whole time, guys. And it's your responsibility to snap your mind out of the cage, right? No one can do it for you. You need to care enough to start looking at all the things you've accepted as truths. And this 1901 Commonwealth of Australia Constitution is one of the biggest deceptions because it grants public servants the right to forcibly dominate and control you because they write what they call laws and you accept them as truths, that they have the power. And remember, they are immune. They have parliamentary privilege. Remember that? They've made Parliament sovereign, so they can't be prosecuted, right? That's not a thing. That's why we use Article 61, which has been invoked since 2001. So it is active, waiting for you to understand it, pick it up, and use it.
We see not the physical control, because that's sort of obvious and easy to understand. How you chain someone to a tree and you force them to work, but the mind control, the mental control, the psychological control, because to me, that is way more important to understand. Because if somebody is free in their own mind and you chain them up and make them work, okay, that's really horrible and evil, but in their own mind, they know that's not okay, they know it's not legitimate, and the moment they have a chance to get away, they will, even if they have to kill their abuser or enslaver or captor or whatever you want to call them. But
So this is what it's been about the whole time. It's about freeing your mind, because once your mind's free, nothing can stop the energy that seeks to find a way to actually manifest it, to bring it into reality. It's unstoppable. That's the point. And that's what I've been working towards, is to get people to really understand how their minds have been enslaved. And now, if you're willing, there are solutions, and they're waiting for you to use. Because when you show them the truth, the criminals who have been hiding it, they can't do anything about it. That's why they obfuscate, they avoid. And they can only avoid while the majority of people accept it. But when they start seeing that there's a majority not accepting it, that's when the whole thing collapses, right? But in order to do this, you need to be able to envision a way to live that's different to how you live now. And this next video is a really good explanation of that.
People don't resist things that they feel are positive truths. They only resist things they feel are negative truths. The reason people resist negative truths is that they feel as if those negative truths always lead to something bad or unwanted. Usually this is a negative consequence. that we feel like we can't deal with, can't face, or do anything to change. In general, people who are brave enough to see the truth, what is, are usually people who believe that they can do something about the truth, what is. And because those of us who don't value the truth experience higher degrees of powerlessness, we feel powerless to do anything to prevent or resolve those bad things. Therefore, we tend to experience truth as leading to only bad things, never solutions. Of course, those consequences that we might imagine will come as a result of the truth may or may not actually exist. Nonetheless, the more powerless you feel, the less okay with painful truth you will be.
All right, so that's really, really important. This all comes down to individual courage. Can you foresee a life different to the one you know now, where you are in charge of your own life and every aspect of it, where you're moving away from being dependent on other structures, right? If you can do that, then you will be free. But if you cannot, if you are still in some paralysis, like, oh, what will we do if we don't have this? And what will we do if we don't have that? If you're in that place and you can't find your own solutions, then you're not going to be interested in freedom. You're actually interested in slavery. And this is where you'll stay. A lie doesn't become truth, wrong doesn't become right, and evil doesn't become good just because it's accepted by the majority. And you have a moral conscience, right? That's all the intelligence you need. And it's whether you're willing to stand up for that and work with it, as opposed to work against it, which the majority, and even those people who call themselves red-pilled, are still doing to this day. So now it's a choice you have.